Hi, I'm Nina Bosky, and welcome to LifeBites, where each and every week we'll get you inspired in the areas of life, business, and media. We'll help you dare, dream, do, and be so you can get out of your head into your soul in order to tune in and take a bite. This week, we're getting you life inspired. Hi, everybody. My name is Nina Bosky, and this is LifeBites Life Inspired. Do I have a special guest for you today? It's really hard for me to describe her because she does so many wonderful things out in the world, but she's a best-selling author of multiple books. She is also a speaker. She's a relationship expert. She talks a lot about love, soulmates, and finding the one. Well, this one we're going to be finding the one, but it's going to be in a fictional story called The Love Thief. So she expands her transformational part of herself in a love story that we all get to hear about today. So with that said, let me welcome to the show, Arielle Ford.
Thank you, Nina. It's so good to be with you.
Oh, it's fun to be with you because you're always conjuring up something new. And why a fictional book? How did this come about?
Yeah, I've asked myself a lot. Writing a novel was never on my to-do list ever. And yet this book showed up in my head and it revealed itself like a movie, and it wouldn't leave me alone until I started writing it. I fought like crazy. I've written 11 nonfiction books. I can write nonfiction blindfolded with my hands tied behind my back. But writing a novel is a totally different thing, and I never wanted to do it. And yet, somewhere in the ethers, I agreed to this. And so I've spent the last 4.5 years taking the movie in my head and putting it on the page.
Well, you and I were talking when this was conjuring up in your head. And I remember you even saying, I don't know where this is coming from, but I have this movie in my head that I think I'm going to write this book. And I want to back up the truck just a little bit before we get into the book, because a lot of people, when they're looking at manifesting something, they don't follow the cues. So what were your cues that were really, was it just a constant tap, tap, tap? How did it manifest for you?
Okay, great question. So a couple of different things happened. The first was the title for the book came to me, and then the first line of the book, which was very intriguing. The first line of the book is, "My mother was right."
Ooh.
And then I started seeing it like a movie, and it was very annoying, totally annoying. And I finally decided, I got this email from masterclass.com one day saying they had a new course with Dan Brown on how to write a thriller. And I thought, God, I love Dan Brown. He's my favorite author. I'm going to sign up just because I want to hang out with him. And at this point, the movie in my head had shown me that most of the movie or most of the book would take place in Rishikesh, India. So class number 3 with Dan Brown was location as a character in the book, just as Florence was a character in Da Vinci Code. And I thought, oh my God, if I were to write this novel, I need to go back to Rishikesh because there's so much research I need to do. And I can't fly for 21 hours and coach. I'm tall. And I don't have an extra $7,000 to buy a business class ticket. So I said to God, I said, God, I got a challenge for you. If I'm really supposed to write this book, then I'm going to manifest a business class ticket to India. And I was like so relieved. I thought, okay, I'm done. I don't have to do it. 48 hours later, the ticket was in my hand. So
Oh
there
my
were
God.
signs, yes, there were signs like that that made it so obvious. And they're still coming. Even though the book has now been written, the signs are still coming. So even though it wasn't on my to-do list, clearly somewhere along the line, I made an agreement to do it. I'm now thrilled that I did it. It was so much harder than I could have ever expected. But I've learned this entirely new world, and I'm pleased with how it came out. And it was torture.
Well, I mean, but I love the fact that you are not afraid of diving into something that you don't really know that world. And I think for people that may be thinking about creating whatever they're going to create in their life, I think giving people inspiration of, hey, it may not be easy, it may be torturous at times, but if you have that calling in your heart, you have that calling in your soul, follow it. Because I know for myself, when I haven't, it's almost like Monopoly, the game do not pass go. You end up back in the square one going, okay, when are you ready? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, now, were there times during the process that you thought to yourself, I don't know, I'm halfway through, maybe a quarter way through, what in the world am I doing? Did you ever have those kind of feelings as well?
Now, once I started, I knew there was no stopping. You know? And there were times like crazy things happened. Like there was a point at which I thought the book was done and it had the ending that I expected it to have, which was different from lots of books about romance. Like I didn't want my book to have the typical happy ending. And then I sent the pages that I had to two very well-known people in the industry, longtime friends, and said, read this for me. And one was an agent, one was a big time editor. Both of them came back and said, loved it, loved it, loved it. I only wish it had a happy ending.
We all want a happy ending, right?
But then we went into lockdown. So
Oh.
suddenly I had no work, right? I couldn't travel. There was nothing to do. I had 60,000 words done. So I thought, but here's something that I didn't expect to have a thought of. I always knew there would be a sequel, and I knew what the sequel would be. The sequel would get to the happy ending. Only now we have COVID-19. We don't know how long it's going to last. Remember, we were told 2 weeks, right?
Yes. I think
And
you and I
all
were together right before that happened. Oh yeah, we're all talking about, it's
right,
gonna be over in a couple of weeks, right? Yeah.
exactly, exactly. And then I suddenly realized, what if I don't live long enough to write the sequel? And two, I now have all this time. So I dug in and started writing again and wrote another 40,000 plus words.
For the
And
sequel. You already have a
well, no,
sequel.
to make
Oh,
it
for
all
the book.
one book
Oh, wow. Wow.
with the happy ending.
With the happy ending. So, that's really interesting because as much as that we want reality, I also think that we need hope and inspiration as well. And I know in your work of transformation, non-fictional work, you always are giving people different angles of looking at life. And, with your what is it?
Wabi sabi.
Wabi Sabi, right?
Yeah.
Book that I love. We have to get into that before we leave today, because I think that is just such a great nugget, especially when people are looking perfection in their relationships. But let's get to the book, because I'm sure people are going, "What is this book? I gotta have it!" Right? So tell us a little bit about the book, The Love Thief.
Okay, so it's about a man who he breaks her heart, he crushes her dreams, and then karma intervenes. So
Ooh,
it's based on actual events, although it's written as fiction. It's about my composite main heroine, Holly, has been totally screwed over by who she thought was her dream man, and
yeah,
she's
I think there's a few.
crushed.
I think there's a few women and men. I mean, breakups go both ways, but as being females here, we certainly have had our share of heartache. So I'm sure there's a lot of
Right.
women out there that
So
can.
she's crushed beyond all belief, and she's crushed because not only has she lost her fiance, who turns out to be a sociopath, she's also lost her best friend and business partner, who he fooled around with,
Whew.
and she gets in a near-death car accident and she can no longer work at all. So on every level, physical, emotional, spiritual, mentally, she's at the bottom.
Wow.
And then she starts to have a series of mystical events, which is kind of funny because she doesn't believe in any of this stuff. She's the daughter of a single mom who goes on Esther Hick cruises and put, dream catchers over the bed of her dollhouse. Listen, she doesn't believe in anything. She's totally non-compliant with her mother's way of thinking. And yet things start to happen. And she ends up in India, where she has even more experiences. And she comes across a man who's a retired psychologist who owns a spiritual bookstore in Rishikesh, who becomes sort of her mentor, her guide, her guru. And so it's this beautiful story of resurrection, of hope, of healing, of inspiration, of discovering what love really is and what it isn't.
Wow.
And like I said, and she gets revenge. She gets the most beautiful revenge. I'm not going to do a spoiler alert here, but when you're at that point where somebody's really screwed you over and you just want to kill them. Okay, she doesn't murder him in the traditional sense, but really, she becomes the catalyst for really bad stuff. Karma intervenes.
Well, it's so interesting you should say that because I had a situation, and I won't mention names, but it was, well, I'll even say it, my next door neighbor. I won't mention names though. Okay. And he no longer lives next door to me. But at the time, it was during lockdown COVID, and it was astronomically his level of disrespect and arrogance. Okay. And I just wanted to just like, I'd be woken up in the, like in all hours of the night. And I was like, oh my gosh. Right. And what I said to him, to the universe, I played, what was it, the song, Long Time Sunshine Upon You. He was playing his music really, really loud, and I put on that song and I thought, you know what? May your karma come back to you a thousandfold. So I didn't wish him harm. I just wished whatever his karma is that he's putting out there comes back to him. And I thought, it's a
Well,
nicer way of revenge.
I always say that I hope you get everything you deserve, both good and bad.
Ooh, I like that one. Ooh, I like that
Yeah.
one. I think I'm going to start. That one is really
Yeah.
good
Well,
because that's
the
even
thing,
that's it, it allows it to be whatever that is for you.
right. You're not judge and jury. You're just putting it out there.
Yeah.
So the thing that's so great about the revenge in this story, though, is that I had a lot of early readers, all of them people who had been totally screwed over by a lover. All of them called me in tears saying, "Oh my God, you wrote this book for me. I've never felt so seen or heard or understood." Because having been in that position, but worse, having had a lot of friends who were in that position, I knew the roller coaster of emotion that they travel. The grief and the loss of losing something, and the hatred and the anger and the rage that you just want to, unleash on them, sometimes all in the same minute.
Well, and also you're talking about multiple things. A lot of times if you're going through a difficulty in one area, let's say it's in love, your career is shining, but in this case, she had it hit on all levels. So, it and
Her entire identity was wiped out. The dream that she had, her whole life, her number one dream was to have the white picket fence, get married, have children, be the mom all the other kids wanted to come to. That was her whole dream. And suddenly she's 38. She thinks she's finally found the one. He whispers in her ear everything she ever wanted to hear. And then the rug gets pulled out from under her, and she discovers none of it was real, and yet she's still in love with who she thought he was, which is how toxic narcissists really screw with you, right? They come in and they paint this world, and you think, oh my God, my every dream's been answered. And then who they really are shows up, and you're in this constant push pull of, wanting he's in there, you had that experience, or she's in there, and suddenly you're dealing with this monster, and you're so confused, and they're gaslighting you, and they're hoovering you, and you're confused, and you don't understand, you're just miserable.
yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about The Love Thief because you said a movie in your head. To me, as you're talking, I'm thinking movie. You think about, and does anybody say, oh, is it like an Eat, Pray, Love book? Do they always,
Yes.
yeah, I was,
Yeah. So
and how is it
so
different?
yeah. So I have a producer who's going to turn it into a streaming series,
Okay.
and she says it's Eat, Pray, Love meets Dirty John, which is exactly what it is.
Ah,
So it's got all the,
woo!
true mystical, emotional heartbreak of Eat, Pray, Love, with the reality of, the horribleness of this villain, who's, a composite character of three other real people.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a streaming series. Don't know when. There's a writer's strike looming. Everything's slowing down. but it's not about timing for me. I'm just excited that, 4.5 years is finally, going to be on paper, and eventually it'll be a series. And the feedback for me is just so great that every time someone calls and says, you wrote this book for me, it's like, I did. I don't know their story.
Yeah. Well, that speaks to the emotional connection that you evoked in reading the book. I think those are the signs of really wonderful writers. And, even with your non-fictional books, you have that canny ability. And even in your speaking, I've heard you speak quite a bit. And, you draw people in. So it obviously it's a raw natural talent that you have, but then to experiment in different kind of levels of writing, in this case a fictional book. I think that is really, really powerful. And it also speaks, I think one of the things I would like to see people get out of this message today is inspiration and hope, that if you have an idea, if you have a creative nudge, that universal tap, 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 start listening to that inner voice versus the outside world that'll always tell you, what are you, crazy? You know what I mean? And did anybody, when you started thinking about this, what were the first responses that people gave you? Was it like, oh, fantastic, cool? Or was it like, huh?
No, no, I was really fortunate. I actually used to print out the emails and paste them all around my office because they were all, this is great, keep going.
Oh, wow.
So it was very, very encouraging. And I became a very needy person. Generally, I'm not a needy person and I have a lot of confidence in my abilities. But when it came to this, I was constantly sending it out to this circle of friends who I know and trust, saying, does this totally suck? Right? Like I needed feedback, which is why I kept it. And then a friend of mine said, well, you should keep a journal along the way. And I made every mistake you can possibly make in terms of trying to get it published and sending it out too soon, and not knowing what I didn't know about fiction. So my analogy now is let's say you do mani-pedis for a living and you're really great and you've got this clientele and they come to you like crazy. You're just the best at mani-pedis. And then one day somebody hands you a scalpel and says, now it's time to do brain surgery. And
Oh,
there's nothing in your mani-pedi, background that has prepared you for brain surgery. That's how different nonfiction is from fiction.
I felt that way when I went from marketing movies to funding movies. Very different world. And I was like, whoa, that's like a whole huge undertaking. That it's a different world, although similar. Wagon or
Right?
the
Movies are
banner.
movies, right?
Movies are
Like books are
movies,
books.
right? Writing is writing, right? But they're such different animals and they require different skill sets. So, I think it's so fun, and how you describe it makes certainly makes me, even though I'm not in that current situation, I would love to just go on that journey, because I certainly have gone through love heartache, and I've also gone through love heartache with business failure. And so for me, I think it would be also a nice reliving of even going, wow, look at where I was and look at where I am right now. I think for anybody on their journey, we've all had love and loss if you've been on this planet, more than 5 years.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just, and for this, it's one of those things that you can't get out of life without having some of these elements happen. So, in terms of this book, what is your main message you want people to get out of this book?
Here's what I discovered. The worst things that can ever happen to you eventually lead to the best things that happen to you. And so when you reach a certain age, you can look back and you say, thank God for that cancer. Thank God for that divorce. Thank God for that bankruptcy or whatever it was. Because of that, I pivoted and I did this, and now I have that.
Yes.
So that to me is the hope and the inspiration that the story really illustrates. Like when you're at the very, very bottom, of course, you can't even imagine not feeling so devastated. But the truth is, being at the bottom means there's only one way to go, and it's up, and it's going to be better.
Oh my gosh, I can so relate to so much of what you're saying. So let's back up the truck a little bit more, because you obviously have lived in the world of transformation and love mainly. Let's talk about your transformational books just briefly. Now, what are some of the main ones that kind of stand out? Because you start talking 11 different books.
Right.
That's huge.
Well, the soulmate secret, manifest the love of your life with the law of attraction, is the step-by-step guide of how I manifested and married my soulmate at the age of 44. I was a first-time bride at 44, and it's everything that I did that I then used with other people that works. If, manifesting a soulmate life partner is number one on your priority list. But then after I got married, I discovered that I had no partnership skills. I was really good at being the boss, but being the boss with an alpha male doesn't work.
No.
And so suddenly I was on the verge of blowing up all this work that I'd done to manifest a soulmate because I had no idea how to keep them. So the
Yeah.
first book was about finding love. The second book was about keeping love. And I wrote a book called Wabi Sabi Love. And Wabi
Love that
Sabi
book.
is this Japanese philosophy, for lack of a better word, that seeks to find the beauty and perfection in imperfection.
Mm.
So it's a lot of stories of how you learn to really love and appreciate all the weirdness of your partner.
I can relate to that. I think I was probably at that place in my relationship because when I first read that book, I was probably maybe 2 or 3 years in, right? And I was like, okay, this isn't my perfect little house. This isn't my perfect little relationship. Wait a minute here, and you start pointing out the faults and the differences. And, I think sometimes we want that person to be like us, but it's not until we rub up against the differences and learn how to negotiate and be in relationship. That's why I found that book so fascinating, really fascinating.
Yeah. Well, it works. I mean, that's the bottom line, is that anybody who's ever been in a serious relationship or been married for any length of time knows that there will be days when you hate your mate. You just hate them. You want to kill them. You think you've made the biggest mistake of your life, until they apologize or you apologize and say, oh, yeah, okay, I can deal with this. So it's really about understanding that that's the nature of putting two humans under one roof 24/7. We're going to irritate the hell out of each other. And, just like, you have an oyster and it gets grain of sand and that sand irritates the internal part of the oyster, but eventually a beautiful pearl results.
Mm-hmm.
That's what relationships are. We're constantly having to understand, yes, this irritation is leading to the pearl. And the book is all true stories of people who thought, I just can't take this one more day, until they learned how to shift their perspective. I'll tell you a quick story that's very wabi-sabi. I had this woman in my workshop who stood up and she said, I have a problem even you can't solve. And I said, well, what's that? She said, well, my name's Stephanie, and I've been married to Garth for 16 years. And he is a super messy slob. The house is chaos, and I just can't take it anymore. And the only reason we're still together is that he has an out-of-state job. So for 2 weeks of every month, the house is clean and pristine. And then he comes home, and then for 2 weeks, it's messy. And I can't take it. So I said to her, I said, well, Stephanie, do you have a dog? And she said, yes. And I said, does your dog shed? She said, yes. And what do you do when the dog sheds? Oh, I vacuum up after him. And Stephanie, do you love your dog? And she got really quiet. And then she said, oh my God, Garth sheds. And in that moment, she saw, just like the dog can't do a thing about his shedding, neither can Garth.
Yeah.
So a year later, I'm writing this book, Turn Your Mate into Your Soulmate. And I remember this story and I think, oh, I've got to find this woman. Was it an aha moment that lasted a day, or what's happening? So I called the promoter of the event and I said, I have the weirdest request. There was this woman, Stephanie, in my course, and she's married to somebody named Garth, and I must find her.
Mm-hmm.
And the woman said, oh, no problem. She's my best friend. Here's her number. God, there were 300 women in that
Yeah.
course. And I call her up and it's like, Stephanie, hi, how are you? Do you remember me? Yeah. How are things with Garth? And she gets all moony and she said, oh my God, they've never been better. She said things are so good that he quit his out of state job to start a stay at home business so we can be together 24/7. And yes, he's still a slob.
Wow. So
So
what?
that's what
Yeah.
Wabi Sabi love is. Garth never changed. What changed is her story.
Yeah, yeah. I've got a funny story for you. So when Eric and I first got together, that's my honey. I'm notorious. I'm kind of like creative and I also have a very structured side. So I call myself a combo special. He's much more structured, but I'm more the creative. Okay. So when I cook, I'm half Croatian. I say it's kind of like the Italian side, right? Like this.
Yeah,
And I've got all the cabinets and everything open. And he's very much you open a cabinet, you close a cabinet, right? And so we've gotten to a point where it's like it's really fun. I'm in the kitchen, I make a really big mess, and afterwards he just cleans it up and goes, and it's great. You know what I mean? And so we learned, but in the beginning it was like, can you close the cabinets, right? And we make it fun because a lot
right.
of times you start to make your partner wrong, and I'm not going to change all that much. I can do a little bit of a better in terms of closing cabinets, but probably that's just who I am. I'd love to think I could change. I've really tried to, but it's just not going to happen. It's kind of like the dog who sheds, you know what I mean? And so he doesn't make me wrong for it. And I think that's really what I hear you saying too, is loving those imperfections.
Right. And having respect for them,
Yeah.
because we can't change everything about ourselves. I mean, we can make an effort, but for the most part, the whole purpose of marriage and taking sacred vows, according to Harville Hendricks, the god of marriage, who I adore, Harville says the purpose of soulmate love and taking sacred vows is to create a safe container so all of our childhood wounds can emerge to be healed.
Ooh, wow. That's beautiful. There is a sacredness. I think if you believe in more of a spiritual side than a non-spiritual side, I think there is a real sacredness to the energy of marriage, not just the paper of marriage or the legalities of marriage. So I love that's a beautiful. Say that one more time because that's a
So
beautiful.
the purpose of taking sacred vows and getting married is to create a container wherein it is safe for all your childhood wounds to emerge and be healed.
Mm, wow. And so much. I don't think there's anything more than romantic love that brings up our wounds. Would you agree?
Oh, totally. I always say the whole process of being in the state of being in love is the socially acceptable form of insanity. Because when we're in that state in the early days of a relationship, that is not love. We call that love because it's nature's greatest drug high, and
Mhm.
that it's our brain on drugs, on oxytocin and dopamine and adrenaline, and it feels great,
Woo!
but it has no relationship to adult mature love.
Yeah.
But we don't know that. It's just a way to get us to procreate and keep the species going. And then, of course, after 6 months or at the most 3 years, it pretty much wears off and pretty much never really comes back. And then we learn to choose our partner every day. And hopefully, we've chosen wisely and we're with somebody who is our best friend, our biggest cheerleader, our safe place to land, somebody with whom we feel emotionally and physically safe. And there'll be days when we absolutely adore them and days when we just want to kill them, but it never means that we don't love them.
I love what you're saying. I say a lot to people. It's not the good times that you find out about where your love foundation is. It's going through those more challenging times. And I know even for myself, Eric and I in the last 3.5, almost 4 years now, have gone through 4 deaths, major deaths, parents and best friends. And so when you look at that kind of loss and how we've come together, I thought, wow, we really are partners in life. And though that element you can't take away, that's not that first love when you're just on that high, it's not grounded in anything. You just feel like you're in love. And it's those elements that I go, wow, this isn't boyfriend or girlfriend, this is real partner, material. So let's get back to the book, The Love Thief. When is it coming out? Where can they buy it so that we can make sure that people know? Because I know
Yeah.
after this interview, I'm going, if it's a pre-order, I'm going to go and pre-order it.
Yeah, so right now it's on pre-order. The actual publication date is June 27th, but if you go to thelovethief.com and you pre-order it, you'll get this amazing bonus. So what I did was I went to the world's top yoga instructors and I asked each of them to make me a video on how to use yoga philosophy and poses to heal strong emotions like anger, betrayal, grief, what do you call it, when uncertainty,
Mhm.
stuff like that. So it's all these free videos from people like Sean Korn,
Oh,
how
wow.
to get to forgiveness, how to reconnect to the divine. So there's this whole thing. Like I looked at every emotion Holly went through and I thought like there's got to be a yoga fix for this. And that's what the free bonus is when you pre-order either the paperback or the Kindle.
How beautiful. So it's thelovethief.com.
Yeah,
We can pre-order and it'll be available for anybody after 2 to buy on June 27th.
yeah.
So I want to ask you one last question. I always ask people this. What inspires you?
Oh, having fun. I look at everything like, is this going to be fun? And if it's not going to be fun or it's not going to feel good, then I look for a way to not do it.
I love it. I always, I came across a company recently. What was it called? It was not Who Gives a Crap, What the Crap, or so, I don't know what, but it's basically a toilet paper company. I thought, oh my God. And their whole people culture is about having fun. And I thought, oh my God, if you makes you laugh every day. So I am right there with you. I think the world needs to lighten up and have some fun, and also buy your book, The Love Thief, dealing with love and loss and reinvention. It's almost like the phoenix who rises. So thank you so much today for being on the show.
Oh, thank you.
All right. I am Nina Bosky for Life Bites Life Inspired. And until next time, remember to take a bite out of life before life takes a bite out of you.